A lot of people here in Florida always look forward to these Texas talks, and full of honesty. John asked me to introduce him as just another drunk who's found a way to stay sober. So here's John.
Thank you very much, Mike. My name is John Carlton, and I'm an alcoholic. And by attempting to follow the 12 suggested steps of the recovery program as I interpret them, assistance from power greater than myself that I prefer to call God as I understand them, some assistance from folks like you, of course, and some effort upon my part, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous today. I always introduce myself that way because I was told when I came into this deal that if I would try to work at 24 hours at a time, that I might find it easier, and that advice has held me in good stead since October 28, 1951. Now, you may have noticed that I introduce myself by my full name. I do that because when I used to frequent those plush sewers, if they didn't know who I was when I came in, they damn sure knew who I was before I left. However, on the other hand, I assure you that I will always respect your anonymity. I have no qualms about my own. I feel a good deal like a Bush League ball player in a Major League park coming here. Before I left Brownwood, it's a small central Texas town. We have about 20 or 30 in our group. We talk AA, eyeball to eyeball, exchange the pearls of wisdom and so forth. I live in an apartment. The front and the back door is open. It's more of an AA hangout, I guess, than an apartment. My household consists of my dog Cricket and my cat Little Bit, and I do my own cooking, so you got me. And just before I left, one of the fellows said, when they got a look at the flyer that Tom sent me with the picture of this magnificent hotel, he said, "John, I'll bet you're going to be nervous down there." And I can honestly say to you right now that I'm not a bit nervous, because I know pretty well what I'm going to say, while you folks sitting out there haven't the slightest idea what you're going to hear. And if anybody has got any reason to be nervous, it's you, not me. But there are a couple of observations that I'd like to make very quickly, and one is that I'm not here to impress anybody. I'm here to be impressed by you, and that's the way that I go to all meetings, large or small. And by that manner, it helps me further stabilize myself against taking a drink of booze. Now, to shorten this thing up, because I know how it is to sit out there, and I'm not going into any morbid details of my drinking, and I'm going to make it rather brief. And to start with, some of you who have known me in the last 2 or 3 years, and I know that perhaps the word's been spread here and there, but I want to perhaps describe me very quickly and save a lot of time. I think the best description of me is a derivative of the German word Gorsob. G-O-R-S-O-B. Stands for a greatly overrated son of a bitch. Now, I could stand here and utilize the time that Tom has allotted to me and talk as a former professional athlete or as a criminal lawyer for some 20 years. Some of that time which I spent in the Department of Justice as a special assistant to the United States Attorney General. And I might say this and coin one of these popular phrases that we've heard today: at this point in time, I'm damn glad I'm not back there now. Or I could talk to you perhaps as a present-day businessman. I don't practice law anymore. I'm in the oil business out there. But that's not the purpose of me being here. And that's why that I asked Mike when he said, how do you want me to introduce you? And I said, just tell him it's another drunk that's found a way to stay sober. And that's just exactly the way that I hope you look at me. Herbert Spencer once said that there was a certain principle which was a bar to all information and proof against any argument that may leave a man in everlasting ignorance. And that principle is contempt before investigation. And that applies to me. I was one of these fellows who lived with a misconception of what intelligence was. I thought that the measuring stick of intelligence was how quickly that a man or a woman could learn a didactic problem in a classroom or a lecture hall or at a convention. And it wasn't until I came among you folks that I really know that the true tape measure of intelligence is how a man or a woman adjusts themselves to the problems of living and does so free of booze, narcotics, pep pills, tranquilizers, and the rest of that junk. And if that adjustment can be made free of those things, then we have taken a great step toward the object of every single one of us who sit here today, alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And that's some serenity and peace of mind. It's my prerogative as I stand up here today. I don't have to agree with everything. Just the same as you don't have to agree, and I don't expect you to, with everything that I say, because I'll be stepping on some of your toes probably before I get done. That's all right with me. You can't find me in this joint. It's too big. But Abraham Lincoln once said, or at least they say he said it, that all men are created equal, and I don't buy that, because some men are born rich and some poor, some weak and some strong. But we are all born equal in one thing, and that is that we have one life, and with that life we can do as we see fit. We can either invest it or we can squander it, and I'm not proud to stand before you this afternoon and tell you that because of my inability to control alcohol, I squandered the most lucrative and productive years of my career. And the reason that I did that was because of my refusal to listen to people who wanted to help me. I flatly refused to listen to those who came to me and said, John, you're ruining a good career. I'd tell them that I thanked them for their interest and they wouldn't be 10 feet away, and I would say to myself, why don't they mind their own business? I have 2 degrees. I'm a well-educated man. I don't need them to tell me what to do. But as a result of my failure to listen to those people, I was forced to stand on that curbstone of life and watch the throng pass me by. But the damnable part of it was that I became a thief of the worst kind. Now, I didn't take a pistol and stick it in your stomach and lift your poke or kick a place of business in. No. I was a worse kind of a thief than that. I stole from those that I loved the most their right to happiness. I was a guy that always complained that roses had thorns instead of being grateful that thorns had roses. The length of time that it takes to change the direction of a person's life is the same length of time that it takes, perhaps, to change an idea. And some people can change very quickly. It took me a long time to change the idea that I could handle liquor. As I say, some can do it almost instantly. They tell about the fellow who was walking around over in the maternity ward. His wife was expecting a baby. It was a sister's hospital, and the Mother Superior went over, and she says, take it easy, young man. All you fathers act the same when your wives are having the first baby. He looked at her, and he said, well, sister, this isn't the first one. This is the 10th one. Oh, she says, glory be to God, isn't it a wonderful thing raising a nice big Irish Catholic family? He says, but sister, I'm not a Catholic, I'm a Protestant. Oh, she says, and with that she turned and started down the ward, and a little nun just joined the staff that afternoon. She called her over and she says, sister, keep your eye on that tall guy up there, he's a sex maniac. But progress is being made in all facets of life today. We've put men on the moon, and we've done many of these magnificent things. Yes, we've made progress in every way. Even some of us Irishmen can eat meat on Friday. Possibly some of our Jewish neighbors will be enjoying ham and pork. And who the hell knows, one of these days, maybe the Baptists will start taking a drink in front of one another. Now, as I said, I'm not going into any morbid details of my drinking. Because, as I say, I know that you're going to get tired, and if you do, you just take off. It's all right with me. But unlike many of you, probably some of you became alcoholics long before I ever took my first drink. Because I was 26 years old before I ever drank tea or coffee, before I ever used tobacco, and never knew what the taste of booze was. It was necessary for me to train. It was necessary for me to take care of myself, because I had to earn an education through what little athletic abilities that the good Lord saw fit to give to me. And I earned my education through athletic scholarships. My heart was set upon becoming a coach. And I might say this to you right here and now. I was introduced from Texas. I've been out there for over 21 years. And I'll be damned if I can catch that lingo, I'm fixing to leave, and I reckon so, and over yonder, I still park the car, and I still laugh. I'm from Augusta, Maine, originally. Took them 15 years to get a pair of boots on me and a big hat, and they haven't got me on a horse yet, and they're not going to. But my heart was set on becoming a coach, because I was a great believer then, as I am today, that it's easier to build boys than it is to mend men, and I wanted to follow a coaching career. And a few months before I was to leave to go to Fielding Yost coaching school at the University of Michigan, my mother was taken ill. And I was called home, and she said, son, would it disappoint you too much if you change your plans for a career? And I said, what do you want, Mother? Because they had told me that she was suffering from a malignancy. Thank God that the diagnosis was wrong, however, because it was many years ago, and Mother lived to be a ripe old age. But I said to her, what do you want me to do? And she said, when I was a young girl, I worked in an attorney's office. Your brother Bill is an iron worker, and I'd be very happy to know that you would become a lawyer. And at her bedside that afternoon, I promised her that I would. And in order for me to earn my legal education, it was necessary for me to become a professional fighter. And I boxed for 5.5 years professionally, and I assure you that it's a pretty rough way to earn an education. However, I'm very grateful to the fellows who handled me, because they knew that I wanted to become an attorney, and I wasn't perhaps given the toughest guys in the world. They took care of me well, and I'm very grateful to them. But you know, there was a streak of phoniness in me in those days, before I ever took a drink. It's always the custom, if some of you boxing fans know that when you go into a city before the day before the match, you don't drink any water or anything. You dry out. And then you eat the next noon. You have a steak and some dry toast, and you take a walk. And I always walked alone because I didn't want my manager or trainer to be with me, and they thought I was superstitious. I was boxing under an Irish name, and what do you think I'd do? When I was sure that they were not with me, the first person I'd meet, I'd ask where the church was. Now, it didn't matter what church or synagogue or anything else, so far as that's concerned. And I'd go in there and I'd sit for 15 or 20 minutes. Not would I ask to win, but I would ask God to keep me from serious bodily harm. I didn't want a broken hand or a cut eye because I'd have another match some 2 weeks or 3 weeks away. I wanted that money. And you know what? I guess he knew that I was a one-way guy then. Because after the thing was over and I'd get back to the hotel, things were all right. I never bothered to thank him. First night I didn't need him anymore. Well, I wound up with a broken right hand 7 different times, and I only have one ear. I'm stone deaf in one ear. My other ear was operated on at the Mayo Clinic. And I was exactly the same way in the Marine Corps, too. That's in World War II, not World War I. When that going would get tough over there in the South Pacific, you bet I'd pray. Oh, God, if you'll get us out of this. When it was over, no, I never thanked him. But when I was admitted to the practice of law, I went to the capital city of my state. Started by myself, and not long I had a partner, and then we had another partner, and then we had another fellow. I was a senior member of my law firm, member of the House Committee of my country club, and a highly respected person in the city. But now I could drink. I could live like other people, so I started to drink, and I did. And I got along fine for 4 or 5 years. But in 1941, I picked up the story of Jack Alexander, and I didn't bother to read maybe a third of the page, because he mentioned or had a picture, I can see it now, of a fellow sitting in a mission hut. Clarence, remember? He wasn't talking about a senior member of a law firm at that time. He wasn't talking about a fellow who'd held many positions of trust, a special assistant to the United States Attorney General in the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice, a man who had been the personal political representative of that great Texan John Nance Garner the last 2 years that he was the Vice President of the United States. No, he was talking about some of the fellows down on the road. But in my heart at that time, I knew that if I kept on drinking the way that I was, what the result was going to be. The people accepted me, and I married a magnificent girl. Now, I've heard these clowns get up behind here and say, well, my wife contributed to mine, my this and that. Well, I'm going to tell you mine didn't contribute to my trouble. She was a magnificent girl, came from a very prominent family, and was a wonderful mother. And the girl should have divorced me long before she did. So I'm not hiding behind that. I had a summer home on Penobscot Bay and my own home in Augusta. She had an automobile, and so did I, long before it was the style. But let me tell you something. Money may build a home, but it won't. Money may build a house, but it won't build a home. I'm qualified to make that crack. And my drinking began to get more progressive and more progressive. And one morning, about 1:30, I went into the cottage at Belfast, Maine, and Polly was sitting up, which was something out of the ordinary, and I said, "What are you doing up?" And she said, "Hon, I'm worried about you. And so are your friends." Now, I'm about half fractured, so you can imagine telling some entirely intelligent individual something like that. And I was one of those bums that the more that I drank, the more dignified I'd get, you know. Well, I can remember it as though it happened 20 minutes ago. I said to her, "So you're worried about me, huh? And these so-called friends, well, let me tell you something. There's a boat 100 feet offshore, baby upstairs in the crib. You've got everything you want, and I'm a damn good lawyer, and you're worrying about me, my friends. Well, now, you just remember this, that I don't need you to worry about me, and I don't need any of these so-called friends to worry about me. As a matter of fact, I don't need anything to worry about me." And with that, I went on to bed. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what happened, but it seems within 72 hours I fell apart at the seams, and to shorten this up, I walked out of my state. The fellow who was educated at Vanderbilt University, who was graduated from the Boston University School of Law, the Harvard Graduate School, and a member of the coaching staff at Harvard, I walked out of my state and I sought succor and maintenance from the Salvation Army and the mission houses. I've had many a pleasant occasion in Florida, and I've had many sad occasions here too, I'll tell you that. I became, and when I say this, I'm not using the vernacular as ordinarily as we do, I became a bum. And I can look back now when they'd say, "Where's that educated hobo?" I didn't mind that at all, but when they'd say an educated bum, I didn't like it. And for 6.5 years, I traveled under an assumed name. No one knew where I was. The rumor was out that I had drowned in Baltimore. I don't know how the hell they thought of that, but they did. I was a dead man, practically. But I was a lonesome man, I'll guarantee you. And I wanted to go home, and I wanted to see my son, and I wanted to see my wife, because I loved her. And finally, I went home. And I got home just in time to be told that she was getting a divorce. And I can remember standing in that courtroom where I had tried many a major case. I had asked an acquaintance if he would try to get custody of Johnny 30 days out of the year, because then I felt, even then, somehow, some way, somewhere, somebody was going to show me a way to get out of this situation that I was in. And as I stood in that courtroom, shaking not from fear, I was sick. I'd laid off to Sneaky Pete and Sweet Lucy of the Bay House. And I was sick and I was shaking. And that judge looked at me when this friend of mine asked that I may have custody for 30 days. He said, "No. He is neither physically nor mentally capable of having custody of his son 30 minutes, to say nothing of 30 days. I immediately left that courtroom and I walked again. And I got into another town, and I was ordered out of that town. I was hung around there a week. The fellow let me sleep in this place until they sent the cops down and to see if I was still in town, and they gave me until 4 o'clock to get out of town. That was on the 28th day of October. And that day was the 28th. The divorce was the 13th of October. And I walked again, and I'm walking along the street in Portland, Maine, of the pair of shoes I could step on a chew of gum and tell you what flavor it was. My neck open, and discouraged, completely beaten. And I'm going to tell you how I came into AA. I came into AA because I thought I was pinched. I'm walking along the street about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a little drizzly. And I don't know where the guy came from, but he extended his hand to me. And he said, "Hello, Johnny, how are you? Where are you going?" And I figured he was a cop. I figured he was a plainclothes man. I'd been picked up many times during that 6 years. I answered him honestly. I said, "I don't know where I'm going." And he said, "Well, come on with me." He says, "There's some guys that know you, and they'd love to see you." Now I know it's the can, because that's the only place anybody wanted to see me. But he didn't turn to the left. He turned to the right, and he got on the elevator, and the first words I spoke was, "Where are we going?" And he said, "Up to the Alcoholics Anonymous Club." And what do you think the first thing that hit my mind? This very brilliant bum. Great, I'll grab one of those suckers for enough for a bottle of Sneaky Pete. Sure. So help my God, I've never drank so much coffee before or since. But I'll tell you something else. I haven't had a drink since either. No. Now, I've heard you guys say, many of you, I don't know if any of you here or not, but I've heard them get up behind here and say, "Oh, when I come into AA." Now, some of you are going to get hell. I'll probably do it. But I'll assure you right now, I'm not the most popular man goes around. But I've heard them get up here and say, "Oh, when I walked into AA, oh, everything was just lifted from my shoulders. Yeah, everything is just fine." Well, if that's so, that's good. More power to you, that's fine. But it just didn't happen to be that way with me. Right from the start, they started lying to me. I'm sitting in Portland, Maine, on that place that afternoon. They had a meeting that night. I don't know what they said, can't anything about it, but there's a guy by the name of Johnny McIntosh who was leaving for Texas the next morning, and he said to me, "Johnny, why don't you come down to Texas with me? I'd like to have somebody ride with me." If he'd said he was going to the Baffin land, it was all right with me. I had to go somewhere. Didn't care a damn where I went. He said, "Why don't you come home and stay with me tonight, and we'll leave about 5 o'clock in the morning." And I said, "No, you got a family." "Oh, no," he says. My wife and daughter has gone to Boston this afternoon. Now, for about 3 hours, I'd be getting that shot, you know. Now, you got to have a little self-honesty in this deal, John. A little self-honesty. Talking to a bum that had been on the bum for 6.5 years, backed up with 20 years as a criminal lawyer, and I'd take your eye out and tell you that you look better without it, and this clown is telling me some self-honesty. Yeah. So when he told me that his wife and daughter had gone to Boston, why, all right, fine. And I went home with him. And he's fiddling with the key, and the door opens, and here's his wife and his daughter standing there, and he said, "Oh, I thought you'd gone to Boston." He liked to poke his neck, so that's the first piece of honesty that I got. So the next morning we started for Texas. He had a job down in one of those airplane plants. And I didn't have a cuter, not a dime. And I rode from Portland, Maine to Dallas, Texas, sitting on an orange crate for a seat. Cold turkey and Sneaky Pete and Sweet Lucy and Bay Huss and Smoke, anything that I could get hold of. So don't any of you guys call me and want me to come and sit with you while you whine and cry and want to finish a drink. Because I'm no wet nurse. I like a Chihuahua dog so long as he acts like one, and when he acts like a bulldog, to hell with him. I don't have to put up with him, and I'm not going to. And for some reason, when he went over those mountains to Tennessee, what he ever went over that way for? And it was before the blacktop roads. And I'm sick. And we're bouncing. And they had a blanket in the back of that truck. And if I didn't like that, I could sit on that orange seat, do a balancing act, you know. And finally, this tough ex-Marine, this tough platoon sergeant, this tough prize fighter for 5.5 years, besides being that brilliant attorney, I finally said to Johnny, his name was Johnny McIntosh, I said, Johnny, I'm going to die. And I thought to God it was, too. I said, Johnny, I'm going to die. I got to have a drink. Now here comes some more of this sweetness and light in dear old Alcoholics Anonymous. Now this guy had been sober for 2 years. I thought he was lying because nobody stayed sober that long. I heard this guy sitting in the second row, and I knew he hadn't been sober as long as he said. Heard him in Canton 21 years ago. Lovable guy. And I'm grateful and thank God there were guys like him. But anyway, I said, I'm going to die. I got to have a drink, Johnny. And he turned like this and he said, you're going to die, huh? That's the way he talked, like this, see? He said, go ahead and die. What the hell good are you? He says, you're no good to yourself or anybody else. I don't see anybody laying along the side of the road. He said, if you croak, I'll drop you off at the next town. Somebody will cover you up. Shut up. Oh, and I'd heard a little of that. Oh, they're great guys. They're kind, nice. Christ, I'm trying, Oh, yeah, he did stop and get me a quart of milk, and naturally, I downed that milk, and when that settled, when that come up, you could have shot pool. It looked like cue balls. Well, five days later, we got into Dallas. And we pulled into a parking lot on a Sunday morning. And he got out first, and I finally got out. I started, and who do you think that he braced right off the bat? A cop. And I thought, oh. Now here's something else I've heard some of the guys say up here. When I came into AA, I didn't like cops, but now I've learned to love them. Well, now, I got some news for you. If there's any of you cops here, I've been in here nearly 22 years, and I don't love you yet. I'll respect you. I respect you, but I don't love you, pals, I'll tell you. Some of these marks on my kisser weren't all put there by boxing gloves, I'll guarantee you. But that cop was very nice, and he said, yes, there's an AA meeting right up the street here. And I went up with this fella, and it was standing room only. It was Sunday morning. And the fellow that was the chairman, when it was finished, you talk about God acting in many mysterious ways. When that was over, he walked straight to me. And again, that hand of kindness and consideration was extended to me. And I got a job helping them move. They were going to move that afternoon. Furniture. I didn't get the job. They said, you're going to move. Help. But before that was over, I'd conned my way. I had to have some place to flop or sleep. And I conned my way into the job of mopping the floors and washing dishes at what was called the Cater Street Club for the privilege of sleeping upstairs. And the only way that we ate down there at the Suburban Club. The Suburban Club. Uptown. Who took pity on those unfortunates down by the tracks. Those clowns were drunks too, but they were dressed up. And they'd send us sandwiches and cake from their birthday parties. And that's what we ate. And I had to set up these bingo tables on Saturday night. And this particular Saturday night, my God, we were looking around and everybody's excited. They got the cards out and they're cranking that thing with the numbers in there. But Karen Tracy, a dame who talks back here, you see, she said, well, I don't understand. I know those beans were right up there last week. And I said, yes, Karen, that's right. I saw them up there. It was 10 years later before I told her that Jim Lacefield and I cooked them and ate them. Oh, yeah, things are very easy in this deal. Oh, yeah. Now, in the course of the conversation, a guy said, you're from Maine, huh? And I said, yeah. Well, he said, you must know Dick Breen. Now, I knew Jim. I didn't know Dick. I knew Jimmy, Dick's brother, in Boston because he was around with the sporting world. And Dick had played football against my brother 5 years before. And when I heard Dick Breen, of course, first thing, that'll be a touch. Now, he was managing a goonie route. He was managing a drying out joint out down there. They get you ready. You go 5 days, get you ready to go on another one. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are some very fine clinics, too. I'm not casting any aspersions on it, whatever. And they told me where it was, and I walked out to this place. They called it the Texas Clinic. And I guess somebody told Dick I was coming, and I walked in. He said, hello, Johnny, how are you? I said, fine. Fine. He said, what are you doing in Texas? And I said, I'm going to give this AA a try. And I had a supercilious grin on my kisser. And that was the wrong thing to say to a guy like Breen. That'd be like saying something like some crack like this guy over here. He looked at me and he said, oh, you're going to give it a try, huh? Well, he said, nobody gives a damn whether you give it a try or not, but by the looks of you, you made a pretty good decision. Took a couple of steps away and he said, Johnny, I know that you were a pug when you were getting your education. And it took some guts to crawl in there. But he said, I'm going to tell you something, kid. This takes a different kind of guts in AA. Here's why you separate the boys from the men, and I don't know whether you got the right kind. Come on back and have a cup of coffee, Sam. We used to laugh about that so much. He said, I figured it was the only way. Give it to you right straight out. That's the only way that I ever got this deal, was straight out. To hell with this theory and analysis and all this. Now, and I'm going to tell you this right now, in my opinion. Now, I'm in the oil business, and it takes me all over the United States. I'm not one of these so-called circuit riders. I'm not a regular AA speaker. I go if I'm asked, but it's not one of... We call them reciprocity boys that way. I'll ask you, you ask me to come to your place, and I'll ask you back, But I've never missed going to a meeting, and I've covered practically all parts of America, because I love to sit there and listen. But I'm going to tell you this, there are dangers that lurk over Alcoholics Anonymous, whether you like to hear it or not. And the two greatest ones is complacency and placing personalities ahead of AA principles. If you don't think so, take a look at your own group sometime. I hope you don't have it over here, but I know we do out our way. Complacency and personalities ahead of AA principles. And speaking of that, let me give you an example. I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been out there a couple of times, and before the meeting, I'm talking to a lady. She's standing in front of the podium, and she said, John, you're back here for the second time? And I said, yes, I have some associates here in Phoenix. Just as a very fine-appearing girl walked by. And when she did, I bowed, said, hello. This meeting hadn't started. She was very sweet, and she acknowledged it. And this dame I'm talking to says, John, do you know her? I said, no, but she's a very fine-appearing girl. She said, her problem isn't alcohol. She She said, her problem is sex. Well, I said, I wish to hell I had that problem sometime. And this deal of complacency, now I'm not talking about the young guys like Hamp and this fella, and my pals from Oklahoma City sitting over here, and my pals from Washington. No, I'm not talking about this from when I'm talking about complacency, and I'm not talking about you fellas with 15 or 20 or 25 and 30 years that's sitting here today, because your presence here is a true indication of your loyalty to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not talking about you. But what I am talking about are these so-called self-imposed or self-entitled, what the hell ever you want to call them, old-timers. That's the bunch that's got the wrinkles out of their belly, got the wife back or got the husband back, the family is back, they've got their business going good, and you don't see them coming to a meeting. You don't see them anymore. No. And you ask them, and what do you think the shot they'll give you? Well, John, I'm so busy lately. And I get home and I get in that recliner, or I have to mow the lawn, and, but I'm going to tell you, I appreciate everything AA has done for me. Is that so? Is that so? Guys like you old-timers that's gone ahead of me, impressed on me that there was a word called gratefulness in this deal. And if a guy who knows where and how that they got their sobriety, and it's their idea of gratefulness to turn their backs on the guys and gals they've left behind them, and those guys and gals that's still out there in the street, to hell with them. I don't care if they never come back. Now that's just my personal opinion. Criticism, you bet. Criticism, you bet. Galileo was criticized, nearly put to death for his thinking. Columbus was criticized, the Wright brothers were criticized, and so are we criticized. But I'm going to say to you right now, whether you like it or whether you don't, some of the time that we're criticized is our own doing, because we start sticking our nose into places that it don't belong. You know that I didn't come in this deal to get saved. There are many qualified people. I see some of them here today. There are qualified men and people who take care of the saving bit. I didn't come in here to get saved. I come in here to find a way that I could change the direction of my life, a way that I could stay sober. That's what I come in here for. I know one thing, I don't know whether it's saved much of my soul, but I know it saved my ass, I'll guarantee you that. I was in one of these high-class joints in there I go again, one of these high-class clubs in Texas. In between planes, I was waiting. They got a lot of these flourishing deals over there. Very lavish outfits, those $80,000, $90,000. Oh, I don't know who the hell pays for them, but anyway. And this was about 3 years ago at Christmas time, and there were some ladies who were decorating the Christmas tree. And out comes the secretary, and there's 5 or 6 of these guys sitting around there. And she said, I have a 12-step call. Would any of you fellas like to make it? Now, we've got these mental giants in AA, too. Oh, yeah, we got authorities outside as well as inside, but there's only one guy that I know that I'd like to sit and talk with and really get authority, and that's the fellow you're going to hear tonight. That's why I say I feel like a bush leaguer in the Major League Park. But we've got these guys, that they think that their authorities. So when the secretary come out and she said, "Would you like to go on a 12-step call?" One of these AA mental giants said, "Who called?" Did he call? And the secretary said, "No, I don't know whether it was his wife or mother or sister." He said, "Wait till he calls. He's not sick enough. When he calls, why, we'll go." But, yeah. Who in the devil ever started that? Did he call? Did Ebby Thatcher wait for Bill Wilson to call him? Did Bill Wilson wait for Dr. Bob to call him? Did Dr. Bob and Bill wait for Bill Dodson to call him? Did they wait for this guy out over there in Cleveland? You bet not. And that's the way that this deal started. One drunk talking to another drunk. And to me, that's exactly what it is today. As that fellow in Akron... As that fellow in Akron said, keep it simple. Modify, yeah. We're going to change some of the things. Well, is that so? There's enough of us guys, I believe, that knows what this thing means to us and what it's done for us, that when they start modifying it, somebody will stand up and be counted. Don't you think they won't? I don't know where the hell I call them these AA water walkers come from. I got to take this coat off. All right. I don't know where these AA water walkers come from. Now that's that bunch that says, "Open the doors, bring them all in. Bring them all in, everybody. We've got the cure for it all." Yeah. Well, if you think that this thing is a panacea for piles, pimples, paranoid, you better read the fifth tradition, which says, "Shoemaker, stick to thy last," and if you don't like that one, get on to the sixth tradition, where it says Alcoholics Anonymous cannot be all men to all things, and neither should we try. Now, when somebody, and God bless your souls if you're here, and I'm for you, and I'll help you. If you want my part of this program, I don't give a damn whether you're on grass, speed, acid, I don't care what it is. But if you are not an alcoholic, and you want my program or whatever I can give to you, you bet you're welcome to it, and you can have it. But I say to you, take it and go among yourselves and leave AA the hell alone. Let the preachers preach, and the doctors treat, and the educators educate, and let us mind our own business. As it tells us that the primary principle of any Alcoholics Anonymous group is to continue to try to carry the message to that still suffering alcoholic. Nothing more, nothing less. That this is a fellowship of men and women exchanging their experiences, strength, and hope with each other, that they may overcome a common problem and help others do what? Help others recover from alcoholism. And that's what it is, and that's why that I'm here today. To pay my gratitude to you folks for doing just exactly that. Now, you're going to look at me and say, "You know, a fellow Nil, 22 years, he don't have much tolerance, does he?" I know what you're thinking. And if you think that, you're 100% correct. I don't. I could take a lesson from that ranch couple out there not far from me, had the only daughter, and she didn't have the benefit of an education that the folks didn't. And they were bound, determined that she was going to have the finest finishing school education obtainable. So they sent her to a school in Philadelphia, and she didn't come home at Christmas, but she came home at Easter time. She went to Bermuda with her roommate and her mother and dad. Her roommate's mother and dad as chaperones over the holidays, like to kill the old folks back on the ranch. But they put up with it. It's going to help her education. And she came home at Easter time and got there just at noon. Dinner time to old Dad, not lunch, dinner. So Dad comes in, he gives his hands a slicking a promise under the faucet. Sits down to the meat and potatoes and the apple pie, and he starts dishing it out of me, kind of sliding it over to Mother and the daughter. Now it was Mama and Daddy when the little girl left. Now it's Mother and Papa, you see. And when the old fellow had finished his apple pie, which he had done while the mother and daughter hadn't got halfway through the meat and potatoes, gave himself a push away from the table and says, well, I guess I'll go out and finish that cartload of manure. With that, he left. The little girl from the finishing school says, Mother, we've got to do something about Papa. The way that he gave his hands a slicking a promise under that faucet was bad enough. But the way that he served lunch was atrocious. But, Mother, that uncouth remark that he made when he left the table, we must do something about it immediately. And that sweet old mother leaned over and she said, honey, let this be our first lesson in tolerance. It's taken me 25 years to get him to say manure. All through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'll circle the field. I'll be in a minute. All through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, we see a favorite prayer of Dr. Bob and Bill. It permeates our program. And in deference to, if there happens to be someone here who is not a Gentile, I'll use the phrase, O Lord, grant to us thy mind and thy spirit. Make us instruments of thy peace. Wheresoever that we find hatred, let us so love. Wherever we find injury, pardon. Discord, union. Despair, hope. Doubt, faith. Wherever we find darkness, light, and sadness, joy. O merciful Master, not so much to be consoled as to console. Not so much to understand, to be understood as to understand. Not so much to be loved as to love, for it's in the giving that we receive. And it's in the pardoning that we are pardoned. And it's in the dying that we are born to eternal life. We see that throughout the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have some very, very dear friends in the Navajo reservation, in the Navajo country in Arizona. I drilled a number of wells on the reservation there. And I made some dear friends. And one day at the Window Rock Lodge, I'm sitting talking with one of the fellows, Charlie, and we got talking about spirituality. And he told me of a prayer that's so applicable to me. It didn't come out of our Bible. This came from an Indian. And it goes like so. O Great Spirit, I hear your voice in the wind that blows breath into all the life. Hear me, I am small and I am weak. I need your strength and your wisdom. Let me always walk with beauty, and my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make me wise so that I will hear your whatever you tell my people. Make my hands always respect the things that you have made, and my ears always sharp so that I can hear your voice. I seek this wisdom and this strength not to be greater than my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. How true that is so far as I'm concerned. I was my own worst enemy. Now, when you leave here on Sunday, when this convention is over, as a matter of fact, when you leave here tonight, I don't expect you to remember me at all. You have been absolutely magnificent to sit and listen to Hamp, and I enjoyed them. And you've been absolutely magnificent to sit this long as attentively as you have. And I know that you recognize, you're fully cognizant of my inadequacy. I know that. And I don't expect you to remember me at all when you leave here. But I hope that you will remember this, that it's not so far from right to wrong, and the trail isn't hard to lose, because I've seen the time that I'd sell my horse to know which one to choose. Now, there aren't any signs or guideposts up to keep you on the track, because wrong sometimes is white as drifted snow, and right oft times is black. Now, I don't set up to be no judge of right or wrong in men, because I've missed the trail sometimes myself. And maybe I shall again. When we wend our ways to our respective homes when this convention is over, I'm confident that we'll do so at peace with ourselves, at peace with our fellow man, and at peace with our God as I understand Him. And I believe today that if we could hear Dr. Bob and Bill from their Valhalla as they look down upon this convention assembled, if we could hear them, they would be saying to you people of Florida who have been so instrumental in this great convention, we could hear them say, well done. Keep going. Don't get discouraged. Keep trying to carry the message to that still suffering alcoholic. And in closing, may I say, thank you, Tom, for inviting me. And thank God for the creation of those two beloved men, Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson, and that little fellow who found Bill, Ebby Thatcher. Thank you, and God bless every one of you.